Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we talk about self-care that makes a tremendous difference. You will find when you start practicing courageous self-care and learning the skill sets that you will have more energy, and it will be sustainable energy. It won't be ebbs and flows of energy that are wild like a roller coaster. You will also have relationships that are fulfilling and satisfying and delicious. And you will have a deep sense of self-worth and self-love and inherent importance and deservingness. I don't know if deservingness is a word, but that is what came out. So I am glad that you are here. Thank you for listening. And what I am going to talk about today is a bit of a rant. It is a self-care rant based on an article that I read in the newspaper this weekend. So first off, I pretty much never read the newspaper. I was given the article by my mom, and she showed me this 3/4 spread of a page that was all about self-care. So I read it, and there were 3 things in it that drove me a little bit crazy. There are so many misconceptions about self-care, and I felt like, on the one hand, part of the article did a fantastic job about sharing that self-care isn't just about going to the spa, it's about things like setting boundaries, so that was fantastic. I totally agree with that. And then at the same time, it had 3 points that I thought were absurd. I would like to share those with you and set the record straight. Now, to be totally authentic, part of when I was reading the article, I noticed that my ego was definitely having a reaction, as in, why did they not consult me? I am a self-care expert. I could have given better answers than the people that they consulted. So that is what was going on, partly for my ego. And I was also, at the same time, looking for what I agreed with. And that's why I told you that some of the article did a great job. Now, the other part is that I remember hearing from someone I was taking a course from that when you declare yourself to be an expert, you have to be willing to share your opinion. And at the time, I thought, ooh, that sounds very scary. I grew up being someone who, in a family where we didn't want a lot of conflict. We avoided it. We would gloss things over at all costs to avoid conflict. And if it did arise, it was bumpy to get through that conflict. So this is coming from someone who only recently, this being me, only more recently in the last few years have I decided and declared that it is important for me to share my voice, whether I agree or not. And so this is an example of courageously sharing my thoughts, because one of the courageous self-care skill sets is that of full self-expression. So let's get into the 3 points that I thought were absurd. Point number 1, the author of the article said that self-care should be free. I'm sure that, or I suspect, that the author was coming from the place of we don't have to spend thousands of dollars at the spa to care for ourselves. I totally agree with that. However, I don't agree with it completely, because self-care is very personal. It's very individualistic. Each individual needs to decide for themselves, making a conscious list, what it is that fills them up and what it is that depletes them. And if your self-care list has things on it that do cost money, then absolutely it's still self-care. And this is a key point I want to make. There are so many different ways that we can care for ourselves. Some of them are free and some of them cost money. So I felt like the author of the article was saying, if it's not free, it's not self-care. And that's just not true. In order to develop a skill set, you're going to need to invest energy. And that is sometimes in the form of money. Money is a form of energy. Or you're going to invest time into it. And we spend time just like we spend money. So if going to the spa does fill your cup like it does for me, absolutely it is still self-care. If you just go to the spa and hope that that's going to cover all your self-care bases, then that's not going to do it. I like to talk about how we need both external and internal self-care. So external self-care is things we do for our body. It is the tip of the iceberg. It is the lotus flower on top of the giant murky root system that is underneath the surface. I talked about that a couple episodes ago. And yes, absolutely, we must put energy and time and care into keeping our bodies healthy and filled with vitality. And if that's the only self-care we're doing, we're missing more than half of it, because internal self-care is just as important. Plus, it makes all the external self-care work so much more effectively. Self-care at times is going to cost money, because if you continue to do the same thing that you are doing now and you are not at the top of your game, you don't feel like your relationships are fulfilling, you don't feel like you have more than enough energy, you don't feel like you have enough time, then you're going to need to do something differently. And when we decide to do something differently, which is fantastic, it takes an investment, either an investment of money or an investment of time. When you decide to invest money to pay an expert to tell you how to do it, or to buy a book to learn something new, or to take a course, you are dramatically decreasing the amount of time you're going to have to spend on it, because experts can shorten the journey for us. They've been through the pitfalls, they know how to overcome them quickly, and so that is something that's going to take some cash. And so that is a form of self-care. One of the mistakes I often talk about that people make with self-care is trying to do everything by themselves. And if you are going to resolve your self-care issues all by yourself, I guarantee it will take you years, especially if you're trying not to spend any money on it. Plus, another thing is sometimes we need help that we need to pay for. Like maybe you have a business and you're doing everything yourself. I just watched a Queer Eye for the Straight Guy the other day, and it was, I don't know if you've seen this one, fantastic show. I highly recommend it. It was two sisters who worked for 30 years, and they had never been able to take their business to the next level because there was zero self-care involved. When 5 people came in and invested time and energy and attention on their business and on their well-being, they were able to go far beyond what they ever imagined in just 5 days. Now I know that it's TV and it's not always as awesome as it seems. There could have been bumps and stuff along the way, but the point is that sometimes we need to pay someone to help us to get beyond where we are now. Because as Einstein says, I'm paraphrasing, the definition of insanity is doing things the same way and trying to get a different result. Expecting to get a different result. Something like that, right? So sometimes self-care is free and sometimes it needs an energetic investment. So that is point number 1 that I wanted to make. Self-care can cost money. Self-care it will always cost some sort of energetic investment, maybe time. It will cost energy, and it doesn't have to be free. If you can find all sorts of ways to have free self-care, fantastic. And if you're not at the level where you would like to be in your life, you don't have clarity, you don't have health, you don't have great relationships, you're going to need to spend some money and or some time resolving those things. And having someone in your corner makes a world of difference. So don't try to do it all yourself. And don't let the idea that self-care should always be free trip you up. All right, let's get into point number 2 of what drove me a little bit crazy in this article. All right, actually points number 2 and 3 are kind of combined, so I'm going to address them together. There was one section of the article that talked about how to reduce stress and be calm and peaceful, and the author used the word grounded and gave some suggestions. One of the suggestions was insane. To me, it is not close to self-care at all. So this part of the article said, if you are feeling stressed, keep a little pouch in your purse of things that will help you feel better during times of stress, that will help ground you. And one of the suggestions was to have your favorite candy in your purse. What? That is just a ridiculous suggestion to me. First of all, if you're trying to ground yourself, candy is not an activity that you would ever use for grounding. And secondly, relying on sugar to calm you down in times of stress, that is just a ridiculous notion. Self-care is doing things that are good for you. Eating candy made of sugar is not good for you on any level. Sugar is responsible for so much illness and addiction. And it is just not something that I think should have been recommended in an article about self-care. Eat candy when you're feeling stressed. Like, what the heck? That is great advice. Not at all. So I wanted to give some better suggestions. Now, probably you didn't read this article, but if candy is something that you do use, or even coffee or any kind of substance that has the potential for addiction and lowering your immune system, then it's just not a good solution. You might as well, no. Anyways, I won't go quite that far. Okay, so I wanted to also talk about grounding. Grounding is a very specific way of tuning into your energy. And especially if you're a thinker, you have a lot of stuff going on in your head, you've got a lot of thoughts, there's whirling thoughts going over and over, repetitive thoughts, which most people have like 60,000 thoughts a day, and over 90% of them are the exact same as the thoughts the day before. So grounding is a fantastic idea to help you get out of your head and help you reduce stress and worry and anxiety. And I'm going to say again, candy is not the solution. So in case you don't know what grounding is, it is connecting with the energy of the earth. I'm going to give you some better suggestions. The other suggestion that the author of this article said for grounding was to put on hand lotion. That is not for grounding. I can see maybe how that would reduce stress a little bit, but it is not grounding. So grounding means to connect your energy to the earth's energy. And we wear shoes all the time. We can be really disconnected from the energy of the earth. So here are some actual suggestions on how you can ground yourself. And I also wanted to say that it's super important, especially right now, if you're listening anytime around May 2019, the energy of this year so far has been a lot of letting go, a lot of breakdown, which doesn't have to necessarily be a negative thing. And what the energy of May is calling for is grounding, to help breakthroughs happen without having to go into the depths of a breakdown. So here are suggestions for grounding that will actually work better than candy and putting on hand lotion. Number 1, you can put your feet on the earth for a few minutes every day, whether it is grass or even a sidewalk is okay, or sand if you happen to live somewhere like that, or out in the garden, out in the park, not the park, the one park you have available, no, a park, or even like a wooden deck, something that comes from the earth, that's going to help you connect to Earth's energy. See how that works better than candy? Okay, I'm going to stop ranting about the candy. Another suggestion is crystals. There are crystals that are specifically for grounding. They come from the earth. You can carry them around in a pocket and wrap your hand around it when you need grounding. You can, if you're doing a meditation, you can hold the crystal. You can have it in your purse and like in that little bag of self-care stuff. That would actually be a really good thing to have, is a crystal that you can hold or have on your person when you know that you need some grounding, when your thoughts are spinning, or you're stressed, or you're worrying. So a crystal is great for grounding too. Another suggestion, and you can just pick one of these and that would be enough, as long as you do it regularly. Another suggestion is to, if you're meditating, or even if you're just sitting down and you have a moment or two, is to imagine roots growing down from either your feet that are in connection with the ground or from the base of your spine, sending roots down into the ground at least as deep as you are tall, and then taking a few breaths, imagining the breath traveling all the way from the base of the roots all the way up into your lungs, and then traveling back down from your lungs through your spine, down through the base of your spine into the earth. So doing 3 to 10 breaths like that, that is going to give you some amazingly grounded energy. See how that's different from hand lotion? Another suggestion is to be out in nature. You can see how that would help you connect with the earth's energy, right? And another suggestion is to use all 5 of your senses consciously. Notice what you see. Notice what you smell. Notice what you taste. Notice what you hear. Notice what you touch. Tuning into the 5 senses will help you get grounded. And a great way to do that is to set a reminder on your phone, or to put some sticky notes around in places that you frequent on a regular basis throughout your house or your work. Pause and notice the 5 senses. If you do that a few times a day, you will feel so grounded. The last suggestion is dancing. Dancing is a remarkable tool, especially ugly, awkward dancing, the kind of dance that I like to prescribe to clients and that I do in workshops and so on. Ugly, awkward dancing focuses on how it feels, not how it looks. So putting on a song, or even moving out in nature to whatever noises are there, or moving in your home to silence, it doesn't matter. But connecting your energy to that of movement is incredibly grounding. Especially if you are incorporating some movement where your feet are in contact with the ground, where you are bending your knees and stretching your knees or bouncing, and just tuning in to how your body actually feels rather than how it looks. These are all suggestions that I feel could have been addressed better in the article to give readers, and now you listeners, suggestions on how you ground for real without candy, and why it's important. It didn't really say anything about that either. So those are the 3 things I wanted to cover. Self-care may or may not involve spending money, and it may or may not be free. Also, self-care is not having candy stashed away in your purse for when you feel stressed. And self-care does absolutely involve grounding, and I gave you some suggestions on how you can actually ground rather than putting on hand lotion. I suppose if you put on the hand lotion and involved as many of your senses as possible, I wouldn't recommend tasting it. But if you were putting on hand lotion and you really just noticed how it felt as you were massaging it into your hands, and you noticed the smell, and you noticed what it looked like, and took in the packaging and enjoyed that and paused, that would be grounding. But just putting it on and hoping it's going to reduce your stress, that's not really going to happen. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I have courageously shared my opinion, and if you disagree, that is totally up to you. But it was bothering me. I kept on talking about the article last night to my husband and telling my kids how ludicrous it was that an article on self-care recommended having candy. So my husband said, well, why don't you just do a podcast about it? And so voila, I have done that very thing. Yeah, I feel better. I feel like there's some good information out there in the world now, whether you read the article in the Calgary Herald or not. This feels really good. So I appreciate that you took the time to listen. I encourage you to choose one of those grounding exercises and practice it for the next 5 to 7 days, especially when you're feeling frazzled, like you don't have enough time to do it, and life is really chaotic. That is the perfect time to ground. I would love to offer you a complimentary resource. So sometimes self-care is free, and it is in this moment. I would love to offer you the resource that I created called the Daily Self-Care Checklist. This is a checklist that you can print off. You can check things off. That's the nature of a checklist, isn't it? But in addition to that, it's also a teaching so that you don't get confused by misinformation about what self-care is. This has the real goods on several activities that you can easily incorporate into your day without spending a significant amount of time on it. Stuff you can either, choose to do instead of what you've already been doing, or it will just take 1 or 2 moments. Substitute one thing that you were doing for this. That was a poor explanation, but it is a fantastic document. I encourage you to get it. You can go to my website, ChristinaMarlette.com. The link is in the description for this podcast. I hope that serves you. I am off to an acting class where I am going to, it's a form of courageous self-care that I actually had to pay for. But through doing these acting classes, I have realized how nurturing it is for me to prepare something and then be able to present it to people who are going to give me solutions and notes on making it even better. That just feels so fantastic for me. I love the ta-da moment. So I'm going to go do that. Thank you so much for listening. I do look forward to connecting with you again next time. The podcast airs usually twice a week. One interview with someone sharing their story of courage and one teaching episode like you heard today. So I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.